On today's episode of PJ and the... Hey, where's the beard? PJ and the Brode.
PJ and the Scruff.
PJ and the Scruff. PJ and the Brode. I am still on my ultimate field trip here in... I almost said Atlanta. Where am I? Hello, Cleveland!
I think you called it an undisclosed location.
I did call it an undisclosed location that rhymes with Nashville.
Or Banklin.
Banklin, Tennessee. So I'm here. The beard is back at home while I'm out here playing. And the ultimate field trip is leading to the ultimate you should try this. So sitting down here with my good friend Brodie, talking about one guitar he recently acquired and one he's had for a little bit of time. But I want to talk about these guitars, and there's a few others in the wings. But we're going to start out with a bang. I'm going to look at you and say, of these two, which one do you want to start with?
Oh, man. Let's start with the prettiest one.
Right.
Which is subjective. The proverbial, literally the pretty woman guitar. And it's based on the guitar that Jerry Kennedy, who's just a legend as far as producer and session musician and so forth. He owned a 1961 Gibson ES335 that he bought here in Nashville when he moved to town, and had it modified with some different levers that we'll talk about that allowed him to have a tool more versatile in the studio, so he could do some of the stuff the pedal steel guys were doing. But this is called the Jerry Kennedy Pretty Woman guitar, and it's part of the collector's choice. Let me look in there and see what number that one is. The serial number, but it is collector's choice. Tilt that back a little bit. Number 49. So it's the 49th run of the collector's choice series. Most have been Les Pauls, but this is one that they built from that his son Gordon now owns and uses. And I don't know if I said it or not, but it was one of 3 guitars that was played on the Pretty Woman riff, the Roy Orbison hit. And we just saw the other one yesterday at the Musicians Hall of Fame while we were here, Jazz Master,
right,
that was played on. And it's just a great 335, all by itself, without all the legacy and history associated with it. And his son Gordon's used it on a few hits too, here and there. But he plays it all the time. It's just a great sounding and feeling guitar. And I was fortunate enough to be able to land serial number 3. They're going to make no more than 50 of those. And they had the original one down at the custom shop here in Gibson, and meticulously measured and weighed and looked at the grain, the nicks, and the bumps and bruises and so on, and put all of that into the guitar.
I think there's one right there.
Yeah, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to have been around and played the original one that Gordon Kennedy owns and uses. There's some love on that side too, and actually got to track the band Next to Nothing that Chris Kluke and I started a number of years ago with the boys. We recorded one of the first songs we ever did in 2 years ago, called Rejoice, over with Gordon Kennedy and Blair Masters, and I played the solo part on the original 61 335. I have pictures of it with Gordon tweaking a few things, and I was kind of geeking out. It looked like he was my guitar tech or something. Yeah, like I'm not worthy. But it feels so much like it. The weight, the look, the feel. It's really amazing what the custom shop is doing as far as recreating that mojo and character of those instruments from back then. And on this, this is pretty heavily modified. And there are 2 things really that they added to this thing. And like I said, in the early 60s, when Jerry Kennedy was going in and doing sessions, he needs something a little more versatile to go in and just be more, a better, I don't know what you want to call it, more versatility to the session, be able to throw in a couple of other things. And of course, back then, you had pedal steel guys and things like that. So he went out on a limb, and this guitar was just a couple of years old when he did it, so it's not like they were thinking about vintage instruments then. They were tools. They called amps, it was a brown one or it was a black one or something. They didn't geek out on gear like we do today. But he had a couple of things, I can't remember who did it, but installed, this is a B-bender, and a lot of them are in that strap where you sort of push it down and it bends your B string. But this one's just, you sort of palm it, and it's...
That's as country as I get right there.
And then the little stop screw on there. So one of the things they had to do is figure out the height of that and the height of this to make sure it really just, bent it the right way, so it stayed in pitch. And it's quite nice, actually. I mean, to me, it's a little bulky to play, but I love the way it sounds and the history with it. It's got to have that stuff on it. And then this one actually takes does it bend up? That takes that one down your high E string. I mean, the B bender works really great, but I mean, you really got to want.
Yeah, you got to hit that. Sorry.
I mean, you almost have to have your arm on that. You got to.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
I mean, you got to really be deliberate about using that. You got to want whatever that's going to do for you. So I do use the B bender thing. It's pretty cool. But I just restrung it and went ahead and left this here. But after we're done with this, I'll put it back through the stop tail piece and just have the B bender. So anyway, I just have been really, really fortunate to have met Gordon and gotten access to the front of the line to acquire some of these instruments. And
I'd say front of the line. This is number 3, and who has number 1?
Peter Frampton.
Right.
Has number 1. I can't remember who has number 2. This is 3, and I'm told that Ricky Skaggs has number 4. So a lot of the legit guys are geeking out over that instrument too because of its history, and it was on Dylan Records, Blonde on Blonde. I mean he's been on you read old Statler Brothers and Roger Miller, and he's just Jerry Kennedy's one of the founders of Music City, and I'm just blown away to to sort of be part of that with.
Yeah, we were at the Musicians Hall of Fame yesterday, and the little theater there is named after Jerry.
Yeah. And
so why don't you play it? Why don't you play? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm sure because you learn and play everything, you might be able to even play what it was built. What made it famous?
What do we have?
Probably got a little more overdrive on it than they might have had in the studio because I was wanking away with it earlier.
Try to be team here.
There you go. There you have it.
There you go. It's great, and just just a real. Just a real organic sound. Then you can get ugly with it, with the. There you have it. But I just, it sort of, it looks like Clapton from Cream too a little bit. A Red 335 is.
So that's the Pretty Woman guitar. Collector's Choice.
It is pretty. And
number 3.
you've probably seen that in a fairly recent episode or issue of Vintage Guitar Magazine. It was actually on the cover. I had Gordon and his dad Jerry talking about it, and the history is really, really good.
So let's move on to the other one that, I don't know, you want to throw fame around. I mean, that tell them what this is based on. Tell them about this one.
John Sebastian from the Lovin' Spoonful back in the day. Again, this is when these guitars were tools. And, the Burst, 58, 59, 60 Les Paul Sunbursts that have been, become the Stradivariuses of electric guitars nowadays. John Sebastian owned this, and I can't remember exactly, when he had acquired it and when he sold it and who he sold it to. But again, Gordon Kennedy owns the original one from John Sebastian, the one he played back then, and he acquired it, I think, back in 2000, and it was actually featured in the Burst, the Vic DePra Burst Believers books.
Brodie has books.
I got books. I like books. I'm a geek that way. But Vic has just he's the master of documenting the bursts and so on. And so issue 4 or volume 4 just came out a few months ago, and he's got the original version of this with Gordon in there, and it talks about how he acquired it in 2000. And basically, long story. I'll tell a little long story, a little less long. Chris and I were able to go record at Gordon's place about 7 or 8 years ago, and that's when I first got to meet him. And I'd always been a big fan of Whiteheart and his playing and so on. And then of course when he went on to write, he's been an amazing guitar player, amazing songwriter, a tremendous singer. So he's been in bands like Dogs of Peace and Whiteheart, and of course when he wrote the Clapton song, it was like, here's one of my heroes and another one of my giant heroes come together. And around that time is I think when he around 2000, when that had gotten real big and he bought this. So anyway, 2010 or 11 or so, Chris and I were down recording, and were able to go over to Gordon's to do some. I really wanted to meet him and see his studio and so on, because I had read about all his guitars and the ones his dad had, and the ones he had gotten as part of the Garth Brooks Association and things like that. So we're there, and we walk in, and he's got a rack that's those 7 guitar racks, and they're all sitting in there. Walked around, and I'm just kind of geeking out because I had seen his studio, the Ample Room, before in pictures and books, and it's got like the walls are covered with Vox grill cloth and Tolex, and it's really, you feel like you're in an amplifier. It's really cool. So I look around the corner, and I see these 7 or so guitars sitting in there, and there's an early 50s gold top. There's he's got an amazing, I think it's 60 or 61 Telly that was there. Another 335, the Pretty Woman guitar, and what I thought was his original 59 was sitting in there. So I'm just sort of walking around like I didn't want to touch anything.
So like everybody's talking, and all you hear is wah wah wah.
Yeah,
wah. You're just like,
oh, look at that.
What is that?
And then I'm like, oh, there's Gordon Kennedy. So I was geeking out on a lot of different levels. So I was trying to figure out. He's telling stories and just being cracking up, lots and lots of fun. So after a few hours, I looked at him and I said, is that the John Sebastian burst? And he's like, yeah. And I said, is that the Pretty Woman guitar? He's like, yeah. And he sort of looked at me like, are you a stalker?
Yeah.
And
he's looking for the security button under the desk to
like,
call somebody.
No. I'm like, no, I'm fascinated with those. There aren't many of these out there, so it's not hard to figure out where they are and who owns them and so on. And so it's like we just kind of connected.
It's a small group. Slash, Joe Bonamassa, Joe Perry,
Billy Gibbons.
Yeah, there's the 59s are
Billy Squire. I think Paul Stanley had a couple of them for a while. Ronnie Montrose. I can't remember. Who all may have. Probably more guys more with money right now that have acquired more of them. But J.J. Cale had one, and then right until he passed away, he had a 60. And Peter Frampton has bought that one, which is pretty interesting. So you can see the lineage of them. There's a very finite number of them. So anyway, we struck up a conversation that day, and he said Gibson is going to make this run of guitars based on my Les Paul, and he told me what it was called, and I couldn't remember. And then when I'd followed up with him, he goes, yeah, that Collector's Choice. They finished taking the measurements and photos and so on of mine, and we'll probably have them in production here before too long. And he goes, would you be interested in one? Yeah. I'm trying to figure out what do I have to sell, to get one, and
he's only got one kidney, so if you'd like to send donations to Brodie.
Yeah. So lots of ham sandwiches and one kidney later.
Is it true you sold one of your children to get that? Is that true?
No, you can't do
That's
that
just
anymore.
a vicious rumor.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Can't even rent them out, mow lawns or anything. So anyway, I was sort of blown away because I really didn't know him well, but he was really generous and like, hey, if you're interested, I could let me see what we could do. So fast forward a little bit when they finally came out, and he said, okay, here's serial number 3 or 5. if you want one, take your pick. And it was only the photos that I could tell from. I couldn't put my hands on it to figure it out. And from what I could see, serial number 3 was more of a plain top, and I really haven't seen the original one. I wanted something that was flamier because, I mean, the original one is just amazing flame. It's one of my favorite bursts of all of them. Kind of a tight grain and real like hologram or something where you can, twist it around and see. So this one has, I don't know if you can see it in the thing or not, but was very much like that, even though the flames were different. So as much as I wanted an early serial number, I went with 5, which is still an early serial number. But these scratches here, that are on it, and this little nick,
some buckle rash on the back.
Yeah, some belt love there, and I think the original one had some kind of a headstock repair done on it, but I can't recall exactly what it was. But even the rhythm and the treble, rubbed off. This has the strap locks on it that are, I forget which brand they are, that are on there. But I was able to even get some photos of this beside the original one and the artist proof and so on. So it was really, I hadn't been in a real Les Paul mode for a while, but when I got this, it felt, that 8 pounds, 3, 4, 5, 6 ounces. It felt like the light ones, and the pickups, I don't know, they're just like custom buckers or something, but they're really like a PAF sort of. And same on the Pretty Woman guitar. They're a lot of these pickups today are so hot that they sort of lose the character, and that's what made these great. And they're very musical. You can go from 1 to 5 is one sound, and 5 to 7 or 8, and then
we'll just play that for a second. You didn't play that one yet, not in sitting there with it in your lap, but just middle position, right on 7. I heard Ed King one time. I watched a lot of his stuff he'd post online from Lynyrd Skynyrd and Strawberry Alarm Clock, and he had a number of bursts too. And he'd always say, when you do the volumes at 7, and that'll tell you what these things really do. And I thought that's pretty good advice, and so it just. Then you go way up and you hear it sort of get evil on you. So it's and even all the way up, just how much you dig into it. It's really great. They're way more dynamic than you would think, or than I thought. I mean, all the guys got the Les Paul thing. I was kind of late to it. Haven't been more of a Fender guy, but I love this guitar, and it's practical. You can take it out and not worry about it. Nothing's going to happen. Something could always happen, but these are fairly replaceable. I think this is the Collector's Choice run number 13. So this was one of the early ones. And you said Gordon he's touring with Garth Brooks stadium tour for the next 3 years, and they just made him another.
I think he said they built him one. I think he said it was 212, but don't quote me on that one. But
we're often not factual on this if you've watched this long enough, so just roll with us.
So yeah, if you see some of the Garth Brooks tour footage, if Gordon Kennedy is playing one like this, I think he's got a 335 and an SG out there too. He's very very Gibson on this one, but. The custom shop built him. I think he said it was 212, but it looks a lot like this. And just every one, they're nailing them as far as the weight and the look and everything. Mm-hmm. Just tremendous. I mean, it's unfortunate that they can't build something like this for a more affordable price. I mean, I wish guys you didn't need a day job and a lot of years of saving to get one. I wish kids could go out and save up for $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 Les Paul and get what they were in the past. But I think Gibson's trying to get their feet under them now and hopefully step that up. So
So these, in my opinion, these would be the pinnacle of Brodie's. It's a collection just because it's a number of guitars, not a collection. Brodie, there's another segment maybe you'll watch that kind of went out of his way to say, listen, this is not, I'm not Howard Leese, right? Like, but I have guitars that I've acquired that are tools, that are really fine instruments. Some of the instruments have very sentimental family-related stories to them. But these two guitars, I would say, are the pinnacle of that collection. Mm-hmm. And just, a great relationship that he's forged here in Nashville, that he's been able to get these. So in his collection, we figured since we're with the Gibson product, you're welcome, Christella Porta, we're going to just look at two other Gibsons that lived in this house before these two celebrities came waltzing in. And why don't you start with that one? Because that was your first one over there, right?
This was my first Les Paul. And it's back in 1980. Yeah, this is, wow. Still probably one of my favorite tops that I've ever seen. It's heavier. It's that unfortunate Gibson era where, ooh. But this, in 1980 through 82, they made what was called the Heritage Series, and it was, kind of a deliberate, recreation of the 59, 50, even 58, whatever they were going after, but 58, 59, 60-ish burst, because they were all over the place. The necks weren't quite 50s, they weren't slim taper, they had Grover tuners on them and not the Kluson tuners. And they had the Tim Shaw, they call them the Shaw Buckers. Tim Shaw was working with Gibson, and these sound amazing. These guys are becoming collectible too. But I was probably 15 or 16, and I play this. Well, I'll tell a story and then say when I play. But they built these for a couple of years, and the serial numbers were the first number was 8, and then you count over a couple of more digits, and you get to the this one and this one, the first and the fifth, tell you the year of it, so 80, and then on these they had a second set of serial numbers, and this one's 241. I don't know exactly how many they made, a couple thousand I think, but there was the standard, and then there was the Elite, which had an ebony fingerboard on it, and that may have been the only difference. I'm not real sure, because I didn't know much other than I wanted a Les Paul, and back then they didn't have all the umpteen million different iterations of them. It was sort of a Les Paul, you had a custom, a standard, and they had deluxes and juniors. But now I can't even keep track of all the different ones they have. Mm-hmm. But it was we were at Easter dinner, and a family member who has since passed away, Steve Asper, played in a band called Axtras back in the day in Shippensburg, and they were great. Had this, and we were at dinner or at our Easter dinner, and I remember him talking to. He knew I played. He wanted, we'd always talk guitars, and he goes, "Well, would you be interested in a Les Paul?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it would be really amazing," And because his wife had bought him this when it first came out, so he was the original owner of it. And then, long story short, I was 15, 16 years old, and he goes, "Well, how about $400?" And
might even have been affordable for a 15-year-old.
I had it saved up. I was sort of a hoarder of money when I was a kid, and so I kind of I looked over at my dad, and my dad was like, sort of that look of, that'd be a fun thing, And so anyway, we ended up doing it, and Steve, he made the comment. He goes, "Yeah, I want to get another, a new motor for my boat." He was a big fisherman too, and he wasn't really playing much, and so I, went to the bank the next day and got the money and got it from him, and I've had it ever since, and it's in just really remarkable shape, for being, almost 40 years old mm-hmm. now. There's no buckle rash on that. There's some little bit of checking, and no worming or anything, but just some little scuffs.
Some swirl on the finish a little bit.
Swirl, but it's. I mean, this sounds really great, and these are getting pricey too. This may almost be a legit collector's item. So Steve Asper. I play this at church every time I play on Easter. I take this just because.
Easter dinner, I like it.
Easter, that's when I got it.
Let's switch for a second. I'll make sure I don't clank them together.
Catch. So
I'll hold on to this one for a second.
all right, you talk about this one. What year did we say this was? 75, I think.
Yeah, I think we said 75.
Deluxe. Again, no bragging rights on the Gibson era then. But there are more and more guys that are really geeking out over these mini humbuckers, and I'm one of them. You know, I've always liked that. But the story of this guitar, Pat and I actually, we've both owned it separately, and we've owned it collectively for a while. But again, when I was 17 or so, there was a mechanic in Shippensburg who called me in Shippensburg, a town of like 2,500 people. You know, if somebody knows you play guitar, you might get a call and, hey, I got this thing here. Can you come take a look at it? You know, kind of a deal. So he called and he said, I've got this old beat up Gibson that I'm thinking about getting rid of. And when you hear terms like old beat up Gibson or this, old Fender or something, they're kind of downplaying it. You're going, yeah, I'll take a look at, it's like, I'll see if we can salvage that, but. So I went over to his place, and it needed some work. It had the input jack was kind of messed up. The electronics had been fooled with. So that's when we were going to the Philly guitar shows in Valley Forge twice a year, and I told him, I said, the guy's name was Tom, and I said, Tom, look, I'm kind of interested in this, but it's probably worth more than I'm able to pay. And I said, I'm not real sure what it's worth. I'm going to guess it's, at the time, maybe $800. And he goes, well, what if you gave me $600 for it? And I said, well, I'm going to this show. I could find out exactly what it's worth and get you top dollar for it. And I think he just needed some money. So I ended up just buying it. And, of course, you and I had swapped back and forth with it going, yeah, it's kind of fun. But then I had realized around that time that the Deluxes, this is what Jeff Carlisi used on a lot of those 38 Special records. And I was trying to figure out that sound and that tone and doing it with all the wrong things, with pedals all over the place, and actually a lot of times with that guitar and got close. But there's something really organic about, maybe organic's not, characteristic or unique with these mini humbuckers, especially in the middle position. And a lot of those riffs like Fantasy Girl and Caught Up in You and Hold On Loosely and so on, it's like that was it plugged into, I think he was using Peavy's at the time. So after you and I had swapped it back and forth and got it in really great shape, I keep it and play it. It sounds really, really great. It's a great rhythm guitar, especially.
Well, and as we found out yesterday in the Musicians Hall of Fame, they have Steve Lukather's 1981 Deluxe that he played on Hold the Line and some others. So the mini humbuckers were the thing at some point.
And you know why the origin of these?
I do not.
Back in the day, these, if you look at that, they had still tooling set up for the soap bars before the humbuckers really came out in like 57. So they still were able to, how could they put something in that same cavity, I think, to utilize some of the tooling and so on. Somebody fact checked me on that, but if you look at it, that's exactly where a soap bar drops in.
And it's even white cream like a soap bar.
Cream, yeah. But this is all original, from that year, and little setup on it, and play. I love it. And I'm seeing more and more guys when you talk about this. Like even the guy down at Groon the other day when we were there, we're talking about the mini humbuckers. He goes, "Man, I love them. I play them all the time." It's one of those things everybody does them and likes them,
right?
But doesn't want to tell anybody.
Right.
So I make it worse by plugging it in.
Is it like a guilty pleasure?
And sort of like plugging it into a PV amplifier,
So what are the chances that that's in tune?
Slim to none.
All right. So we're going to do something. We're going to make things pop because we're not going to get up. But we're going to wrap this up. I've enjoyed hearing about these guitars and spending some time here. And
if you squeeze that little thing,
all right, it can not pop. Yeah, that little button. Well, what little thing?
There we go. Let's do something for
Well, let me. So, if you like what you see, you can subscribe and hit notifications so you know when we put up another video. And as always, we've enjoyed our little field trips here. And just want to tell you, on PJ, on behalf of the Beard, sitting with the Brode, that no matter what you hear, you never have too much gear. Legit gear, legit. And so we're going to play, what are we playing? Peace out from Nashville. Alright. So I'm a moron. You see that camera, the microphone thing hanging down there?
Yeah.
I had to plug it back in. It still picks up from the phone.
Oh, okay.
But I had to take it out to listen back to hear what it sounded like, and I didn't plug it back in.
Sweet.
These are nice. That's why he likes to have two audio sources, because it never fails that we do something stupid. And I'm the one that did something stupid this time.